Chris?
Yeah, possibly.
That's all about
This is
music.
me stimming.
Like, I have a thing you could use.
Oh, but we need somebody to.
Hi,
Hi!
everyone, and welcome to our channel.
We're just gonna wait maybe another. We're just gonna wait another 2 or 3 minutes for a few more persons to join in, and then we'll begin to talk about abortion.
It's on any other platform.
All right. Maybe we should begin.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, hi again, everyone. Welcome to our YouTube channel. My name is Christina, one of five.
One of the 5 Christinas that we
Right.
changed.
I'm the policy and advocacy manager at We Change. I'm going to pass over to Tajna.
Hi, everybody. I am Tajna, comms and advocacy officer at We Change.
Why Shante?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Shanti, and I'm the Health and Wellness Officer at WeChange.
Hi everybody, I'm Christina, one of the 5, and I'm the community outreach officer at We Change.
And off screen is Devan, who is our social media coordinator. She's sitting right beside me, actually.
Yeah, and he's doing the
Now
tech
show.
stuff
Come
for
again,
us.
Come again. All right, so today we're going to be talking about abortions. But before we get into that, for anybody who doesn't know We Change is a community-based organization that does a lot of work around reproductive justice as well as gender-based violence. And our target group or the people in our community are lesbians, bisexuals, trans women, gender non-conforming persons, non-binary persons, just anybody who is non-heterosexual. And the aim of our organization really is to foster community care and to think about ways that we can do community care and do it in a way that centers people's actual needs, which is a part of why we're doing this conversation today. Because abortion is a very huge and controversial topic in Jamaica. It shouldn't be. It'd be great if it wasn't, but it is. And one of the things that typically happens with the conversation around abortion is that it goes very left and it ends up not centering and not putting the needs of the people who are having and seeking abortions in the middle of the conversation. So we wanted to talk today about that. And before I throw it out to my other hosts, I want to kind of share some house rules, or what I would call house rules. So one, if you say anything transphobic, homophobic, sexist, misogynist, we're blocking you.
You're out.
You gotta go.
You're out. No questions. This is not a safe space for free speech. It's not, because we don't believe that there's any debate as it concerns whether abortions should be accessible or not. The fact of the matter is that it should. And this conversation isn't to hold space for opposing views at all. It's to hold space for people who are seeking abortions, people who are interested in having more information about abortion, having correct information about abortion. And that's what this conversation is about today, where we're not open to we're not open to anything that is anti-abortion, and we will be blocking you with the swiftness. We will also be ignoring your questions and ignoring your comments if it's anything that is antagonistic, anything that is negative. We're just not going to hold space for it.
Like if you came thinking that it was a debate about whether or not abortion wrong or right,
it's not. That's not what we're doing on Sunday evening. No,
it's not.
Bye.
Other than that, though, we're a very safe and cool group of people, and we want to have a conversation about that. So to kick things off, we're gonna hand over to Christina with 2 E's.
Hi everyone. Just to affirm all of that, it is really not a debate. And that's why we're choosing to start with the greater framework of reproductive justice. Sometimes we talk about abortion in a sort of vacuum as if it's the solution to all of the problems that we have, as well as, the greatest evil known to mankind. And it's neither of those things. It's a part of how we care for people and we center their needs. And it's a human right. And, there's just a bigger framework, a bigger picture that we need to be looking at when we're talking about abortion, and also how we approach abortion in terms of the legality of it, and providing access to people. So when we talk about reproductive justice, we are talking about a tradition that is so embedded across cultures across the world, whether it's our own Black communities or indigenous peoples. It's really a recognition of the fact that reproduction is an important part of humanity. It's an important part of how we get here and how we live here. And so it needs to be treated with some more seriousness and some more recognition of the ways that whether you choose to have children or not, your reproductive health will always be a part of the conversation. It will always be something that needs to be taken into consideration in very serious ways. So, and that's inclusive of all people, whether you're queer, whether you're Black or trans or indigenous or from a racial minority or wherever it is, you know, even if you don't, have interest in having children or anything like that, your reproductive health still matters. So, and also that intersects with all the different identities you might have as well, and the place that you live in, and how much money you have, and how much education you have, and how much information you have. It's about access, it's about dignity, it's about affirming your rights and the options that surround the choices you're able to make. So when we talk about abortion in Jamaica, we want to frame, the actual act of abortion within the bigger conversation of, are people able to navigate having abortions? Are they able to navigate caring for their reproductive health? Are they able to access the rights that already exist around that? Are they safe? Are they cared for? What options do they have? So, because even if we were to, legalize abortion tomorrow, just like right off the bat, there would still be so much work that needs to be done in terms of, you know, addressing stigma, for example, or talking about, who will have access to abortion and under what conditions. We still have sexual violence as an issue in this country, and there would be intersections there that need to be considered. So we're just going into the conversation about reproductive justice with that framework in mind, of the fact that, it's bigger than abortion. The abortion conversation is just a small
That's
part of a larger framework.
And one of the things that I think about a lot, especially in the past year or so, is that we, even as people who are doing some sort of abortion advocacy here in Jamaica, one of the things that we really need to think about is, do people actually have the choice or the ability to choose abortion as an option for themselves? Like the general debates in abortion is usually pro-choice or pro-life. But even as people who are pro-choice or people who are pro-abortions, we really have to think about, what does it mean to be pro-choice and what does it mean to have choice? Because for a lot of people, especially people who identify as women or people who are seen as women, the choice to have sex isn't always within our
Yeah.
it's not always ours. There's a huge disparity or just a huge gap in who is able to negotiate when we have sex, how we have sex. Should we use a condom? Should we not use a condom? More often than not, women don't get to make that choice, right?
Mhm.
They don't get to decide that contraceptive is something that we want to that they want to use while having sex. And so until we're able to look at the full things that go into people making a choice, we're not really gonna have a choice. And as Chris had said, if abortions should be made legal tomorrow, that wouldn't mean that people still had the opportunity to choose abortion as a safe option for themselves. Because one, you still have to work on stigma that exists, right? And two, is that something that my partner would allow me to do? And we have to use the word
Yeah.
allow, because
Mm-hmm.
if you live in Jamaica,
Yeah.
say there are certain things that women don't have the they don't have the ability to make that choice for themselves. And so when we're having this conversation, it has to be a lot larger than yeah, the woman them can't have them choice, you know? It has to be a little bit more nuanced than that.
And not only in partnerships, like romantic partnerships, but there's also, take for example, a teenager who gets pregnant and their
Mhm.
parent makes a decision for them that, you know, you are going to have an abortion, whether you like it or not. Those things also have to come into the conversation that we have about reproductive justice, because
Right.
those are like real issues that don't get spoken about at
Hmm.
all.
And when we're talking about reproductive justice, we're not just talking about access to abortions, we're talking about access to contraceptives.
Mhm.
Is it easy or difficult for people to have access to contraceptives? Is their environment a safe environment for them to exist in? Is it one that has frequent water, frequent clean water? Is it one where garbage gets picked up every single day? Not every single day, but gets picked up
Regularly.
Some
regularly.
people get it every day, so me now me not know what happened
That's
to me.
true. That's true. So, how possible, or well, are the conditions safe enough, or are the conditions in existence where people can really and truly make that decision for themselves to parent or not to parent if they don't want to parent, um, have the ability to consider really all of their options when parenting? Like, do we have a lot of those choices, right? And
And I love that you're interrogating choice, Christina and Tajna, because it's something that we know that we have to do in general, because we have the choice conversation around consent a lot. So, are you sane? Are you, logical? Are you in full possession of all your faculties? There's so many conditions to choice in consent, Were you
Mhm.
coerced versus whether it was something that you wanted? Were you able to say yes or no? And to be affirming and to be affirmative and to be bold and confident and to say yes first and say no later, or it's so nuanced in that conversation. But then when we come to abortion, it's just choice, no choice, and there's
Mhm.
no gray area. So
Yeah.
when we're talking about reproductive justice, about choice, it's also, did you have enough information to be able to make that choice? Were you supported? Did you have counseling? Did you have, an environment in which, where if you did make the choice to have an abortion, you wouldn't find that your whole life becomes derailed by stigma and the whole community decides, yeah, the abortion girl that. And you
That's revolution.
understand? So there's exactly. So it's not so black and white. It's not just okay, people can choose now and argument done. We've done our work, we're gone home. There's still
Mhm.
so much that needs to come out of that. And I love that you're also bringing in the day-to-day experiences of what reproductive justice looks like, because it's about having comprehensive sexuality education that is affirming and scientific. It's about having access to information. It's about having, like Christina rightfully said, how do you negotiate sex confidently? Is it, are women in this society, are people who have sex and could have abortions in this society able to say yes versus no versus I'm interested versus I'm not interested without the threat of violence, for example? That's also a part of the conversation. We're also talking about having options when it comes to contraception. And this is something that we're always talking about. And I can, run out on a tangent here and talk about the fact that, when we're talking about contraception, have you seen the blanket sized list of complications and things that can happen from some hormonal birth
Mhm.
control versus, not having emergency contraception options that are reliable for women above a certain weight limit? Like,
Right.
so there's so much innovation that also goes into this conversation, because we do need options and we need science to keep improving to ensure that we have options. And if you do choose to have children, because that's also a part of the conversation when we talk about abortion and reproductive justice, if you do choose to have children, can you parent them in a safe, supportive environment? Can you have a safe pregnancy? Can you have support before, during, and after? Is this something that you will have to navigate on your own without any sort of help? Can you do that? Recently we had a conversation come up about women who just dash with them children or abandon their children, and we didn't really delve into what kind of societal conditions and
Would cause
injustices
them
create
to
this
do the
space for someone to feel like they had to do that, or so there's just, it's a bigger conversation, guys, and we do need to approach this with more nuance and more respect for dignity and life, and quality of life and all of those things, and really remember that we're talking about people, we're talking about unique situations, individuals, and we need to remember care as a central part of that.
Period. Okay, so we have one comment here from Robin Vlogs. So Robin says, we need to invest in teaching people their reproductive rights. People are still surprised that we have the right to choose a partner, the right to choose if, when, how to have children. Yeah, because nobody talks about that in school.
Yeah.
They
You don't
really don't.
you don't learn that you have
You're
the
not supposed to be
ability.
having sex while you're in school. Actually, you're not supposed to be having sex. Like certain people are not allowed to be having sex, like people who are fat. It's
Mhm.
not supposed to be happening. Persons who are disabled are not supposed to be having sex, right? Like why?
Yeah.
You can have sex, amazing.
Even when they
That's a
say,
thing.
even when they say that you can have sex, like you're a child over 16, you can have sex, you still cannot go get the birth control
Right, without having
without your
consent
parents
from your
saying,
parents.
okay, go on. So
It's always funny that we go to that, but also sometimes your medical provider does not want to prescribe contraceptions to you.
yeah.
Like, or if you do have a complication with your contraception, they're gonna ask you like, why are you on it? Like as a young girl, and I'm like, could you just
Mhm.
control and let's move on? Like you're literally my doctor. We're supposed to be talking about my needs and centering me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like you have a choice in those scenarios because your doctor is supposed to know what's best for you, and so that takes away our autonomy even further because your medical provider who's supposed to be working along with you to help you figure out your choices is not doing that.
And
Remember that they're even like, if you want to have surgery, for example, to get rid of your womb, if you're not use it,
You have to have your
you're not
husband
use
sign
it,
off or
yeah.
something like I'm like,
yeah, if you're married,
Yes.
your husband,
Or if you're too young, they'll just say,
Mhm.
no.
they'll interrogate you or not, and basically invalidate your decision by saying, oh, but you might want children in the future, you
Yeah.
might
Yeah.
want to, and I think Shante made a really good point about the fact that because medical practitioners and healthcare providers are endowed with so much authority, which we believe in science, but at the same time people know their bodies, and people, the healthcare process should be one
Yeah.
that includes all of us. It should be one where it's a, I don't want to say give and take relationship, but it's a symbiotic, meaning it's a relationship where we're feeding off of each other, where I know what I'm feeling in my
Yeah.
body and I also know what I believe is right for me at the moment. And as my healthcare provider, yes, you have a certain kind of skill set and knowledge that I don't have, which means that you're providing me counsel, but at the end of the day, the decision is really left
Yeah.
up to me. And
Yeah.
we
We
don't
don't get that.
we don't get that.
You're the expert on medicine and I'm the expert on
On me.
myself. Like
There you go.
you cannot
Mhm.
take one away.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
realistically, what we've seen throughout the years is always that for medicine and within healthcare is that the opinions of Black queer persons are obviously like brushed aside. Like you don't have a choice. And so when we talk about reproductive care, people all of a sudden like reproductive care, yes, reproductive justice and having your reproductive health and rights requires an element of care in that
Mhm.
engagement, and that when you're talking to your medical providers. And I don't know what happens in this scientific understanding of healthcare that just dissuades persons from wanting to introduce conversation about what's happening with our bodies and us having
I need to do. I'm so sorry.
I don't even remember.
That's fine. Marvet was saying that
There's a-
they're hearing a feedback. I'm not sure why Marvet, but
Yeah, could you let us know if you're still hearing the feedback?
yeah. In the
In
meantime,
between time.
uh, just before we move on with reproductive justice, another element, as we're mentioning, queer bodies that are. Oh,
Oh.
Robin is saying that their audio is fine.
Okay, Margaret. You
Okay,
do
we'll
that.
see you,
Okay,
Margaret,
goody.
sweetie. As we're talking about queer bodies and people who are queer, a lot of people who are non-heterosexual and non-cisgender have a really difficult time with accessing their reproductive rights because we still have medical professionals and healthcare professionals who are very transphobic, very homophobic, and that creates a huge barrier in even thinking about what your reproductive journey or your reproductive life can look like. Because if I don't feel confident that when I step into a public healthcare facility that I'm going to be treated like a human being and that I'm also going to have access to a birth of dearth of information, then a true mountain subject. If I'm not confident that when I step into these spaces I'm going to get enough information to make decisions about my body, then I'm just not gonna do it. And again, as we're talking about abortion and access to abortion, again, if it becomes legal tomorrow, a trans person will probably have the worst time trying to get any sort of abortion care, any sort of
Yeah.
information about abortion. Because the first thing is, if they're a trans man, then the kind of violence, the kind of harm that they will come into by stepping into a public healthcare facility is, and then we know that there very likely isn't going to be any kind of justice or any kind of recourse if
Right.
any harm comes to them. So these are the kind of conversations that we need to have and or that we're having. And another thing that I want to mention before we move on is that when we're talking about reproductive justice, one of the things that I like to mention specifically is that the state, meaning the government, should not make any decisions about your body. The state shouldn't be involved in decision making about your body. What the state is supposed to do, what the government is supposed to do, is to provide a safe infrastructure, meaning facilities, well trained doctors, and not just trained in medicine, but trained in how to be competent with people and how to treat people and how to treat different types of people. That is the responsibility of your government, right?
Aftercare support.
And providing aftercare support, right? That's the responsibility of our governments when it comes on to reproductive health. It's not about them deciding that we can only get abortions up to 12 weeks or that we cannot get abortions at all. That should not be the responsibility of the state. It should be between me and my healthcare provider, and you as my government. You're supposed to be building out these
Can you
facilities
imagine
that
like
can do it.
realistically having to like submit a request to like your government? Like, I mean that it's not what's going to happen, and having to wait on them to say yes, you totally can have an abortion because
And
you clearly
everybody
outlined.
know.
Absolutely not.
Everybody knows how long government take for everything. I can
Exactly.
imagine.
You have the child, and 18 years later, they're like, yes, you can have an
You
abortion.
can have an abortion.
There's a question from Twitter from Robin Nass. Is Robin Nass the same as Robin Vlogs? Okay, so Robin says, the convo has shifted to my favorite bone of contention / curiosity. Acceptable healthcare for minority groups, especially LBQ women. Are our healthcare spaces actually caring for our health? I can answer that because We Change has done 2 studies on reproductive health for LBQ persons and transmasculine persons. And the fact of the matter is that a lot of queer people find it very difficult to go to, oh, hi, Robin, find it very difficult to go to public healthcare facilities. In fact, most queer persons would prefer to go to a private doctor, which is more expensive, right? And we know say most queer people also don't
not
have
have it.
insurance.
Like
right?
how?
Don't have it.
Not have the
But-
insurance, not have the money, and just not have it.
Exactly. But the fact is they prefer going to a private healthcare facility because they feel like at least they'll get the kind of care that their money is worth. And it's not to say that private healthcare facilities are better. They're not, because discrimination is still very present, but they feel a lot better going to private facilities. And I also know that especially for trans people and trans people who are looking to transition, there aren't a lot of spaces where they can go to get any sort of information about hormone replacement therapy. None of that, right? If I remember correctly, there's like one endocrinologist here in Jamaica that is open and willing to help out trans Jamaicans. And
the specialist areas that we require in Jamaica for a lot of the things that need to happen. For example, endometriosis, you're not just supposed to go to your doctor, because very often they're gonna send you back home and tell you that you just have intense cramps.
Hey man, just take a
crazy.
I found out last year that they're actually supposed to do an endocrine test and a test in your brain to see the chemicals and what's happening, because that is also a very big indicator that you might just have endometriosis. And I'm like, I could have not been dying this entire time had we just invested in these.
And we don't have that information.
Beautiful.
We don't.
Okay, but even if I have the information, now what?
And then care and then support.
Yeah. And then
None of that.
Have the baby anyway.
No, thank you.
But I love that you brought up endo and all of the different reproductive health issues beyond fertility. Like, that's not the only thing we care about, you know?
But
It's
also,
like there's so many people who live in like literal pain, just like constantly, and and we don't care. We're like, have the baby, and after you have the baby, take out your uterus and you'll be fine.
Or it's not like, no, that pain is normal.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yes.
That's what everybody is feeling.
And
you're
to
fine.
it too.
actually, they tell
very
you once
much
you
We
have
do.
a baby, you should definitely have another, because it's obvious that you can carry the baby to term. And I'm like, do you think this is trial by error? Please don't play with me and my room
Obviously,
like
we
that.
can do.
Don't do that. Because they just think everything else is fine. And I just think generally reproductive health care, maybe within the Caribbean, needs some work. Like,
It is. It does. Because it's not centered in justice.
And I want pregnant people to realize that this conversation is for them as well, especially cishet pregnant women. Like, because I think sometimes they just opt out completely. They're like, I want my baby, so why am I talking about abortion? This is
also a
knock
part of
on wood for every pregnant person who wants their baby. Not all pregnancies go to term, hon. Like, and I know you know that. And you need
a lot of
options.
complications arise where
You
an
need
abortion might be something.
options.
Pregnancy is complicated.
It is, you know, and whether you decide to have a child or not, and even if you really do want children, sometimes pregnancy is also not a thing that you can access so easily. Like, there's so much about this conversation that is really about you as well. So don't just tune it out and think that, you know, you can just stay on the safe side and this vanilla side, and it not have nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with you.
and
It's about when you go into the hospital or when you decide to have your child, when you're in labor, will you be heard when you say you want this option or the other option? Because you dismissed everybody who told you up front that this part of the conversation was hard for me. Doctors didn't listen to me because I'm trans or whatever. You never care about none of that. But what about when it's you now and you're in labor and you have issues and nobody's listening to you because they think you shouldn't have anything to say, you know?
Don't know if you remember that case, but Jodie and Ferran's case is a perfect example of this.
Yeah.
Perfect.
It's about you.
Hetero men, you all need to be listening as well, because you're also involved in the conversation. You also have a
we
role
gonna
to
get
play.
to you.
We're gonna get to you, but for right now, we're gonna go over and talk about what are the facts of abortion.
I love it. Oh my god.
What brings up?
Okay, so abortions have been going on forever, forever and ever. Since the beginning of time, people have wanted abortions, have accessed abortions, and I think that we're in a really lucky period of time because we've advanced so much that abortions are really safe, really normal, really nothing to it kind of procedure
Right.
in most cases. I'm grateful for that. I'm I'm grateful for that. That's all I'll say there.
Support.
So,
Look at you.
so abortions. Let's talk about how they happen. So medical abortions happen usually before pregnancy gets to 12 to 14 weeks.
Mhm.
That's when you're more likely to have a medical abortion. And what it means to have a medical abortion is that the abortion is induced using pills.
Mhm.
I cannot pronounce the name of the pills, but I know
I'll
this
help
one
you.
can.
Mifepristone
Mhm.
and
misoprostol.
misoprostol.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
The two M's, M&M's.
Mhm.
So you use that combination of drugs and you use them to end or interrupt
Your
a
pregnancy.
pregnancy. Interrupt. I love
Whatever
how
you
that
want
sounds,
yourself.
right?
Just knock on the door. Hey,
Yeah.
hey.
Hey girl,
we're
hey.
cooking in there.
Rent due.
Yes. When we start to talk about surgical abortions now is after this time period. So 12 to 14 weeks, a
Mhm.
medical abortion is
Dilation and
usually
evacuation.
a medical abortion is usually the best way to go. When you get to above
no.
that is when you want to have
Surgical abortion.
a surgical abortion,
Also
and that's called a
called-
DNE,
Which means
which means dilation and evacuation.
Mhm. Very
Right.
good, girl. It's a big word for Elmo.
That's a big word for Elmo. Right. Right. So as we said, this is surgical. It's more invasive, but it is safe. So this is where you'd go into a doctor. What I should have said for medical abortions is that a lot of times it's completely safe for you to do it on your own with, like, somebody there for you to call or anything if anything happens to go wrong. But it's people usually do them on their own or with
Yeah.
with the assistance of someone who doesn't have to be a medical practitioner.
Right. Those are called self-managed abortions. And again, you don't need the supervision of a healthcare provider or nurse or doctor with you, as long as you have accurate information, as long as you have all of the instructions on how to do it, you should be able to manage your own abortions on yourself. And we're not lying, there's tons of research and tons of information out there about self-managed abortions,
Yeah.
because it's become one of the more popular ways of having an abortion. As Tajna said, we have managed to exist in a time where there's so much research and so much information, so much so that abortion has become a personal enough thing where you don't need to go into a healthcare facility or to a doctor to get an abortion. And that's great, especially for people who don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to
And
pay
the
for
time.
one, or the
And the
time
time.
to,
Yeah.
to do that.
And also people who just change their minds because there's changes in their life. So I don't know if anybody watches Jocelyn Cabaret, and there was a young lady who said she was in a relationship with a man for 4 months, and they had initially planned to have a child and whatever, and then all of a sudden he just got up and left her without anything, and she had to make that decision for herself. And these are the realities that persons exist within. And then, like, for persons who might have just done
It's
a one-night
over.
stand and not be sure because they didn't have a regular cycle, and then they find out that they're pregnant and they're like, absolutely not, this is not something that I wanted for myself. These are some of the ways that you're gonna have to consider getting that pregnancy interrupted.
Yeah, interrupted. Love that. All right, I'm gonna read a little about surgical abortions. So DNE, and that's the dilation and evacuation, requires preparation of the cervix using osmotic dilators and or pharmacological
Big word for
agents.
Elmo.
Big word for Elmo. And evacuating the uterus primarily with forceps using vacuum aspiration to remove any remaining blood or tissue.
And sorry. Go
So
ahead.
so that's usually done by your doctor. Whereas the biggest difference is that one
It's very much
is more invasive and is usually done by a
Needs a
doctor.
professional, yeah.
Yeah, and medical abortion, you can do it at home, you can do it with a friend. Personally, I'd call my friends over, we'd have a little wine, we'd chat. That's just me though.
As it should be. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later about what care looks like in
Yeah.
abortion. And I wanted to mention something about the D&E, which is that so the D&E
So my Wi-Fi.
is usually, are we still online?
Yeah.
Great. We had a minor
Technical difficulties.
technical difficulty a while ago.
We were interrupted.
But the thing that I want to mention is that a lot of the times surgical abortions is what anti-abortionists use as a way of showing you how horrifying abortions are. And we know the kind of images that they usually use and go for, right? But that's not what happens. More recently, what is used, as Tasha mentioned, is a vacuum aspirator. So literally what a vacuum does in terms of pulling out. So that's what it does. It pulls out all of the tissue out of there.
And also, late-term abortions are very, 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 very
extremely rare.
Like
Extremely rare.
like it has to be like wild circumstances. And we'd like to take to like mention married persons who have late-term pregnancies may have to get an abortion, right? So it's not just for any quote unquote careless gal or careless whoever. Like that's not the narrative that we're going with. Anyone can require an abortion.
Right. And with late-term abortions, again, it's extremely rare. By the time somebody gets to their third trimester, they usually want their child. Right. And would have been carrying the child to term for that purpose because they desire the child. The only reason, and usually I don't believe that abortions actually even happen in the late term. They usually perhaps do a C-section instead. So those don't happen. So don't let anybody come to you with any kind of foolishness with images of body parts being pulled out of people. That's not happening
That happens
right
in
now.
a pregnancy though.
Right?
And I think the whole myth of like the commonplace late-term abortions is really just people trying to say this is how careless you are.
Yeah.
Even if you did get one abortion, you would have do it long time, but no, you're just 7 months into a pregnancy. Say, you know what would be cool right now? You know what I'm feel for? Abortion, and it doesn't happen. That's
it doesn't, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of fear mongering again is just what it is. It's a way of putting doubt into yourself and making it and trying to make abortion seem like the careless, monstrous, awful, evil, cruelest thing you could ever do. And that's just
we're laughing because someone has
it's a comment.
Please show it, Dave. Please show it.
Right. So late-term abortions, very rare.
Very rare.
That's something that you should keep in the back of your head when persons are trying to, you don't create fear mongering in you. Because no.
And one of the things
and let's be in centering care about late-term abortions as well. Let's remember that usually the people who need them are devastated by the fact that they need them. Usually they wanted that child and they cared for that child and they carried that child and had so many aspirations about it. It's usually because of complications.
Right.
Either the fetus is non-viable, it happens, you develop without critical organs or something that threatens the life of the mother in a really serious way, or the parent who's giving birth. So, it's just sometimes you see anti-abortionists and they enter that particular conversation with such just like this worst energy. Like these people they're suffering. They're having a very difficult experience, so just some care and some compassion for what that actually looks like.
Very true.
Okay.
So I'll do the overview because I think ending with care sounds like the best thing. So I'm gonna do a small overview of what the landscape of abortion here in Jamaica has looked like,
It's 448.
which is that, right, so everybody knows abortion is by and large illegal here in Jamaica, except for in the case of saving the woman's life, right?
And even then.
And even then. But so abortions are largely illegal, and this is coming from our Offences Against the Persons Act, which is an act that we had while we were colonized by the British. So this is an act that has been in existence since 1864. It's 2022.
Not even like a full generation after after slavery
Like
was no longer a
several.
thing. Like
Immediately.
you were goodly born into slavery, and the law like little bit in the later parts of your life. Yeah.
Right.
The law was there so that we could continue to have a supply of enslaved bodies, because the
Right.
slave trade did stop keep, and that's why we still have that law, because you are all these manufacturers of the labor force.
Right. It was a great way of ensuring that this labor force that we need to continue to be productive and to continue to service capitalism is here. So we had that act, and then throughout the years, we've had several circumstances where our legislators have been considering reforming our abortion act, or our laws around abortion. So we know in 1975, we had our health minister at the time who he would have created a policy paper that basically said that abortions could be possible if in the case of incest, in the case of rape, in the case of carnal abuse. So those were the three circumstances under which abortions could be had. And as a result, they created they created a maternity unit at Glen Vincent Hospital. I'm not sure if it's even still functional right now, but the maternity unit is usually where some abortions would happen. It was still extremely stigmatized, but it was said that some abortions would have happened at that place. However, because we're Jamaicans and because we have a Jamaican government, that unit ended up falling apart. It was severely underfunded and the staff was completely underpaid. And so that resource that had existed that time no longer existed. And then we come to 2006, 2007, when Minister Horace Daly commissioned a review group to basically do some research around what is happening in Jamaica, what impact is the law having on people who are seeking abortions. And so they did an entire research. You can actually find it, I believe, on the Jamaica Parliament website. We will find that and put it on our social media pages for anybody who's interested. And from that review group, a lot of information came out. So for example, medical doctors at Victoria Jubilee would say that women would come into the hospitals with some very interesting sort of injuries. They would have sepsis, they would have some tears and such, their vagina, and that's how they've been able to recognize when there's some sort of termination, that there was an attempt at termination that happened, which I want us to remember that point, right? Because I'll mention it a little bit later. So that happened, and so an entire joint select committee was created to draft a termination of pregnancy act, which exists, by the way,
from 2007.
We have a draft termination of pregnancy act here in Jamaica.
They said let's draft it and just
they drafted it, but
good job.
The Jamaican church, I use church as a big term, as a big umbrella term, got a hold of that, meaning they heard that was going to happen, and then as a result of that, our parliamentarians, our legislators, they backed out of implementing this. And then we come to 2018, where MP Juliet Cuthbert Flynn, she brought this up again as a conversation that we need to have, and as a result, the Human and Social Development Commission or committee, I think it is, they accepted submissions from within Jamaica, from across the diaspora. If I remember correctly, they had like over 1,000 submissions, including letters, emails, all sorts of things. One of which was We Changes, and we had an entire discussion. And then, if I remember correctly, it was said that they believe that this is a vote that Parliament needs to have, and so we end up here again with nothing. So we have these continuous debates. We have the money that is put into research. We have money that is put into erecting a maternity unit, and then we still have no changed abortion law, and we still have no safe, accessible spaces for abortions. So that's been like the landscape, the political and legislative landscape of abortions here in Jamaica. And then we had CAPRI, which is Caribbean Policy Research Institute. They did what we can call one of Jamaica's most comprehensive research papers on abortion, but Capri's paper mostly focuses on the cost of not having a Termination of Pregnancy Act, which is that, you know, the public basically the incomplete and unsafe abortions that are happening in Jamaica. Here is what is the cost that's happening, that the cost that it has on the government, as well as children who are had but were unwanted, and the effect that has had on him. Here's the impact of that. And while that's a really good research, because I think it has some decent information in there that we don't actually have, again, it focuses a lot on the cost and it doesn't focus a lot on the people. And that's a critical part of the information, because the fact of the matter is that it's usually the most marginalized people in our society who is being affected by not having accessible abortions. It's young teenagers who are having sex and, you know, get pregnant but can't have an abortion. It is wives, as Shante mentioned before, wives who can't negotiate or don't have the power to negotiate the spacing of their children in their relationship, that sort of thing. So that continued stalling from our government, it's completely affected just people's lives in general. It's affected people's lives. It's affected their ability to make these choices about their bodies. And
that brings us to a question. Does the parliamentary process really work? Really and truly.
It's a good question for us to interrogate. Yes.
Are we ready?
Yeah. Our Dave is alerting us to some of the comments that we've been getting, and I don't want to read them. So Alistair says, abortions are the most responsible thing anyone can do once you have access, your mental, physical, and your mental, physical, and financial state to be a productive parent. More power to those who stand their ground. And that's extremely true. Amen. Making the decision to have an abortion is one of the most responsible things that anybody can do for themselves. We have another comment from Shanique CJ Watson. Hey, Shanique, love that. Love that. And something we all know is that these pro-lifers, anti-abortionists, are only pro-life until the life is here on earth, after which they don't care. God go with you and the pitney.
Actually, when we were making our submission, I do remember someone who would have been pregnant. No, it was a submission from, I think it's Father Holland's group. Do you remember the nun that came and they were talking about the young girls that they took into the facility that had to carry the child full term, and how the
she was
young
like
girl
12 or 13
turned her life around. I'm like, excuse me, how do you turn your life around as a 12 or 13-year-old pregnant child now being forced to become a parent? And why do you feel that type of reframing of the conversation makes sense? Like, are you all right, my friend? That's your brain.
We do that so often.
Why do we have
all the time? These are children.
Our technician Devon has things to say. I'm gonna turn the camera towards her.
Hey, Dave.
Hi. I have things to say on that, because it upsets me every time I think about it, about nuns and priests and pastors and whoever coming and telling us that, oh, this child wanted to have an abortion and
They
she
should be
changed her
locked up.
mind. As a 12-year-old child, if all the adults around you are telling you that you have to keep this child,
You're gonna
that the right thing to do to keep this child, that if you don't keep this child, you're a bad person, God not gonna love you, you're not gonna, like, they've given you this support because they've taken you in because you were pregnant. If you then don't have this child, you are going to be thinking, I'm not going to have this support anymore. And so, did she
Exactly.
really make that choice? Or did she say to herself, this is my chance at survival? If I don't have this child, I don't have the support, I don't
anywhere
have
to
these
go,
people around
don't have any
me,
food to eat.
I'm a bad person, may I go to hell, may I go burn in a hellfire. Did she really make a choice? Was she forced? Was she coerced? Was she forced? Did she do it willingly?
It's just classic
Okay, I'm good.
manipulation.
There you go.
And I think this is a perfect time to segue into care when we're talking about abortions and when we're talking about reproductive justice, because a lot of the times people assume or make the assumption that all the people who seek abortions are careless. First of all, I want to reclaim the word careless. I want to, because usually what careless means is where we usually use that word for people who are making decisions for themselves about their bodies and how they want to engage their bodies. That's usually how we classify people who are careless. We're classifying people who are autonomous, which we all should be.
Yes.
But
Nonconformist, making decisions for themselves.
right, that's usually what we mean.
How dare
And
you.
one of the things that we want to do is we want to change the profile of the people who are actually having abortions, right? Because people think that the decision to make an abortion, to have an abortion, is always an easy one. And not my button. And it's not always. For some people, it's
For
the
some people,
easiest
it is
decision in
very
the
easy,
world.
but for
It's
some people,
something that I need to do. For some people didn't want to have an abortion, but an abortion felt like the best thing for them to do. And we need to be able to make space and hold space for all of those feelings and emotions.
Yeah.
And
And I
so,
think, oh, go Shay, go
oh,
Tish.
no, go my love,
The
and then we can segue
politeness.
into me.
The politeness.
No, it's just that what Chris just said just kind of hit a nerve with me because, and this is a slightly more international perspective, but there's so many people in really precarious positions right now, whether it's through, if you look in the US, for example, or in places like Europe and Asia, where there's so many like geopolitical issues and people are fleeing war and really terrible situations. Like, even if some of these people wanted their children in those conditions, sometimes pregnancy is just so fraught, you understand, so they have to make a decision. It's similar as we approach climate catastrophe space. People are going to have to make
And the
these
pressure
decisions.
in 23.
There you go. You're going to have to make a trade-off sometimes between your survival and your child's survival. And there's so many conditions around us that are constraining those choices. For now, it's a lot of the times economic and smaller issues. But there are places where people are living on serious margins where, yeah, the choice is existential. It's not just I don't feel like being pregnant. So broaden your perspective on that a little bit.
But also, I don't feel like being pregnant is a very big decision.
It
Like,
is valid too. Yeah.
because there are other things that are informing that choice. So I think we were driving through St. Thomas other day, Christina and I,
Yeah.
and we saw that there was development happening,
I
or
see.
looks like development, and we realized how the parish was just ripped from Bull Bay, go back a little bit, and we're like, the communities that are here, where are they going to get running water from? Because I know that there used to be a river here and there's no longer a river here. So that means it's been interrupted. So what's going to happen to these communities? How are people who have children going to need to figure it out? Like, we go so far and no further when we have these conversations about abortion, which is why we're here today to think about what abortion as a caring practice can look like.
Alison.
Look here now, Alison. Speaking as a Saint Thomasian who lives here, that is the least of our problems. Let me
No,
just say
not
that.
Not
KFC
a
was
KFC.
being built.
Not a KFC.
No,
Not
but that,
KFC.
but you know that's America for development, though.
Right. No,
In this country, it is a very strong indicator.
Mm-hmm.
of development.
However, you know,
We digress.
given that St. Thomas is on dirt,
No, for true, no.
yeah.
For true. So why is care an important part of the conversation around abortion or reproductive health? And that's simply because we need to create and hold space for the complex or complicated feelings that people may have when they try to access an abortion. So the abortion process is not just, I don't want to be pregnant, let me end this, move on with my life. But it's more so, I don't feel capable. I don't think I'm in a space to have a baby right now. I think maybe an abortion would be best. I can barely survive and take care of myself. I can barely survive and take care of my family members. But for some people, they might not be able to even have that thought in their head because, as we've said, their children, they might also be persons who are living with disabilities and are dependent on the state for funds. You have persons who are LGBTQ, and that also brings up a lot of other things that you have to navigate as a queer person in Jamaica who might not be able to participate fully in the economic sense, and so you don't necessarily have the income to take care of a child. And we need to make space for that thinking. And then next, it's now, all right, where can I get reliable information that is consistent, that'll hear me out and have a conversation with me, and be aware that even if we have this initial conversation, I might change my mind and not want to have an abortion, but 2 weeks later, I'm gonna want to have an abortion, and we're gonna have to do this a couple more times before we get to like our final decision. If my final decision is an abortion, where am I able to access a safe abortion? And if it's to not have an abortion, where can I get support? So I know we think of PATH, but PATH does not actually give you like significant contribution to your household.
You said path?
But also to qualify for PATH, if you have a running toilet in your house, you're disqualified. And I just want people to know that if you have a running toilet, if you have a microwave, if you have a stove, you're disqualified.
This country doesn't care about children.
They don't be
I want to read a comment from Robin. You're gonna get a star because you're just in on the show. So Robin says, let's not forget, some persons might still need help with self-managed abortions. Very true, and we'll talk about that. I am wondering how easy or accessible this is for disabled persons, persons with low literacy, persons who can't afford transportation in case of emergency. Girl, Robin,
Yes.
Several
because
things. You bright.
because that's an essential part of abortion care, right? So I was trained as an abortion doula. I like telling everyone.
We know.
Big up the people at Dapo Doula. Well, it's not Dapo Doula, it's just Dapo, which is an organization out of the United Kingdom.
Big up ignorance.
Big up Inroads.
Big up self.
Big up Zachi, big up Carly. Both of them are the co-founders of Dapo. And what Dapo does is that they provide so much caring information and just caring spaces for anybody who's trying to seek an abortion. And what Robin mentioned in terms of people needing care for self-managed abortions, everything that you mentioned is exactly a part of what needs to be considered when we're talking about care, right? Very simple things like transportation, like either having money to be able to transport yourself or having money to purchase the pills, which we know is a very difficult thing here in Jamaica. That's a whole other conversation in and of itself. But
money for aftercare, so you're gonna need your pads. You're also gonna need money in case you have to miss work, because there are complications that do arise from self-managed abortions, as you would have said. And we all know that not every parish has a hospital, and if your if your clinic is locked and it's only open between the hours of 9 to 5 and you have to get an appointment, and even after you get an appointment, you're still not going to be seen, we have worries, we have trouble right there. So which is why again it's necessary for you to have somebody or a number of persons who are able to support you as you have a self-managed abortion, or even maybe a doctor on call. You can say, hey, but not
Something is
everybody can
happening.
access
Yeah.
that.
Right.
And I think you also mentioned persons who are living with disabilities
Yeah.
who are not considered as full citizens based on the.
Or people.
We're
They're
just
not
getting
real.
our Disability
They're not real
Act
people.
revised just last year, and
Why
there's
would
a
they
lot.
need an abortion? Why would they
They're
become
not having
pregnant?
sex.
Persons who live with disabilities are not having sex. I'm like, really?
And I also want to point out that persons with disabilities are at a higher risk of being sexually assaulted as well.
Yes. And they have different accessibility needs that need to be taken into consideration in this conversation as well. Because it's one thing for you to say, well, the information is online, you can just read it, but
No.
what if you are
The
blind?
digital divide is real in Jamaica.
You
But even
understand? What if you don't have internet, but also what if you can't access like written material? Or you can just listen to this video, but what if you understand? Like,
Define
there's
the
just, yeah.
and there's no captions. What do I do? So like again, when we're having these conversations, we have to have them in a very holistic way, right? And again, one of the things that we're trying to develop here at We Change is this idea of community care. How can we use the resources that we have? And sometimes that resource isn't even money, because I feel like a lot of the times when people hear resources, they think money. But what kind of resources do you have that you can
maybe it's because we say resources. What kind of support exists?
what kind of support, right? What kind of support can you give to someone? What kind of support exists? And how can we create that channel of support for the people in our community, the people who are looking for this kind of support? And it's really something that I don't know, it's just extremely essential. And one of the things that that I learned about in my course is just how, I don't know, it's the simplest thing, but it's something that doesn't even come to mind, which is just those very tiny, tiny things that are so useful for people who are seeking abortions. For example, Carly, who is one of the founders of Doppel, she's an in-clinic abortion doula, which means that, because we know it's a foreign of things, so
Well,
she's usually, some parts are foreign, so she's usually inside an abortion clinic and usually is there for having physical support with people. So some of the things that she talks about is, she has a conversation with the patient beforehand. They'll talk about very simple things like consent. Like she'd be like, is it okay if I hold your hand? Would you like if I hold your hand? Is there any kind of music that you like to listen to? Because we can play this music in here so that you can talk about, so you can feel comfortable and feel at peace while this is happening. Do you have a favorite snack that you might want to have? Do you have somebody who will be able to pick you up? Is there somebody who is going to be there with you at home? Do you need that kind of support? Just those very small little things can be so useful and helpful for somebody going through an abortion, because even if you're doing a medical abortion, right, it's a process of a thing. It's not something that you take the pill one time and it's done. You have to do doses, right? A series of the doses over a period of time. And during that time, you'll be experiencing cramps and all of that. So an important part of care is considering those little things and how we can intervene in those spaces. So again, even if we're having this conversation about abortion reform on a larger state, national level, we also have to take those very small things into consideration, right? So it's not just about passing the law and then moving on. And it's also not just about passing the law, having the facilities and then moving on. It has to be a space that is really and truly centered on the abortion seeker and ensuring that the space is one that makes them feel safe as possible, especially since we're existing in a community, in a society that is so stigmatized, right? So we need to ensure that people feel safe as possible. And also the care goes beyond after the abortion is completed, right? Because again, we still live in a place where they call the people then that should be the girl, or you have graveyard in the
what I've always thought about is like you're calling this person, but you don't know the reality of them needing to seek an abortion.
Idea.
You don't know if they
You
had
have
an ectopic
no
pregnancy. You don't know what was happening.
You don't care.
You don't know if they were beaten to the point that they lost their
The
pregnancy, or if
worst
they
don't
just
care.
needed
Yeah.
an abortion. And this is the language, and I think we should fight. Actually, there was an episode of a show, I don't remember, but the young girl was suing her school because they didn't give her enough information about reproductive health, and so she contracted HIV.
Agreed.
But I do think that's something we need to
start-
consider over here,
we need to
because
start
if
the
you're
day
not
Saturday.
giving me the information to make the correct choices with my life, you should be held accountable in a way that I feel comfortable about.
If it even don't go nowhere, we need to like start rattling,
The
like
cages.
yeah.
But I must pray,
Because-
to the non take life seriously, and that one of the sleep too peacefully at night time.
Yes.
I want politicians
Stress
to
them
start
out.
because them are gonna do this if we do if we're not bother. Yeah.
Like
That's how they're supposed to exist.
yeah, and that is how we care. This is how we care for our community. Yes. So who should be a part of the conversation around abortion? Everybody?
Mhm.
Everybody, and then some.
Yeah.
So men, both cis and trans, and we do say trans men because they are also
men
able to
Need abortion.
yes, they are also able to carry a pregnancy if they so wish. And Christina had spoken earlier about what it's like to access trans inclusive care in Jamaica. Imagine what it's like to seek that type of assistance for an abortion. Imagine the additional complications for that. But also, cis hetero men need to be involved in this conversation because otherwise it relieves them of doing any work. And I think society has allowed them to do that far enough. But also, one of the things I've noticed is a lot of persons who are anti abortion tend to be men because they don't know what's happening, right? And so you need to include them in that conversation. Otherwise, they're just going to think, okay, it's okay for us to take a seat back and make decisions about what's happening with women's bodies because we're in positions of power. Absolutely not. You need to be informed because you're also involved in this, right? You're also supposed to be there with the person who's getting the abortion to support them. So if I decide I'm with a man and I need to get an abortion and you're my partner, we're going to have a conversation because you're not going to force me into this and tie me to this relationship because I did not want this child. What is that going to do to the relationship if we have a strain from having a child that I was not prepared for and I don't want to participate in parenting? What's going to happen is I'm going to leave you with that child and go about my business. All the best.
Yeah.
And again, that's a part of why we should, when we're talking about abortions, we should talk about them in the framework of reproductive justice, because it goes beyond just my body, my choice, right? I love the phrase my body, my choice. Love it. But I think my body, my choice makes it a very individual thing. And the fact of the matter is that for a lot of us here in the global south, meaning you're not from America and you're not from anywhere in Western Europe, for a lot of us, our lives exist within community, right? We don't exist by ourselves. We exist in a family and we exist in a community. And more often than not, our community is a part of our support group. Our community is a part of the people who give us care. So when we alienate community from the conversation and make it an individual burden to carry on there, just think about carrying any sort of anything
in
by
life.
yourself, right? That's difficult and it's a hard thing to do. But having
Gabby, I'm coming
What
to
did
you,
Gabby
Gabby,
say?
because I said it last night. We were talking about cis men forcing their partners to have abortions and the choice of the partners not being taken into consideration. And all I keep thinking about is a lot of these men in power who have forced young women to have abortions who are now making the choice about the women officers or persons in the country who are seeking abortions.
So again, this is another perfectly amazing reason why we cannot exclude cisgender heterosexual men from the conversation, because they're doing these dubious things, and we just need to center everybody. Everybody needs to be there because everybody needs to learn and everybody needs to unlearn. And again, if the abortion seekers are the center of the conversation, then we need to also accept that abortion seekers have partners who are cisgender heterosexual men, and we want the abortion seeker to feel as safe and as supported as possible. And we need to ensure that, or well, their partners need to be ensured that they're informed and that they are providing as much care as is possible for this abortion seeker. So,
Yeah.
like, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, and cis men have reproductive issues too. Like they
Say that
need to take
again, them in the back. Say that one, my friend.
I'm
Come.
just saying sometimes we behave as if they don't have any stake in the conversation at all personally in their own bodies. Like you need reproductive options too. You need contraception as well. It needs
Mhm.
to work for you. You need control over whether you want to have a child and whether you don't want to have a child and how you are going to parent that child. That conversation is entirely something that you need to be concerned about as well. So it's
Just love
not
us.
just about making the decision for your partner or forcing your partner. What do you want?
Mm-hmm.
How does having a child impact your life? Like think
Yeah.
about it, boo.
And they also need to be educated on everybody else's reproductive rights so that they can
Yes.
stop forcing people to do things that they don't want to do. But again,
Indeed.
that's not a conversation.
We digress.
Yeah.
much.
So in creating a community care practice for abortion, if you were to seek an abortion, what would you have liked in that type of space? I know for me, I would probably want to have all the information in the world and to be able to know that even if I change my mind a week from now, I can come back and say, hey, so I was thinking, right? What if I whoops, 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 right? Because one of the things I think that people forget is like how Christina was saying, it's not an individual undertaking when you decide to have a child. It's a community. There are persons in your community who might be excited that you're going to have a child, but after a while, life happens, like a pandemic happens, and people can't support you in the same way. And then that affects your ability to properly care for
Yeah, to
yourself
parent.
and your child. And that's something that you're going to have to take into consideration if you want to move forward with your pregnancy.
Yeah.
Because realistically, doing life by yourself, if you are not wealthy, is extremely difficult. Doing life by yourself in a third world country as a black queer person who
Forget
is
about it.
disabled, it's not happening, sweetie. You exist within community, and I have no idea why.
You will
Here-
not survive.
It just never did have a mute. Never did have at all. And so I think it becomes a big process. And I think that's one of the fears of talking about abortion is that you have to consider other people in it. Like you constantly have to be revising the policies, revising the legislation, revising how we do or how we understand reproductive justice and reproductive care. And some people are lazy and just don't want to do that. And we all know
Which
who
is-
I'm talking about.
Which is why I believe that, again, I stated it before, that this part of the conversation should happen between people and their communities.
Yeah.
So again, I really feel like the job of our governments is to make the space accessible for people so that they can walk in. I personally believe that abortions should be free of cost.
Truly.
Or have abortion pills over the counter for like $100 or $250 like the birth control, right? But what the government needs to do at all times is to always ensure that access to abortion is smooth as possible. That's where I think the government should come in, right? When it comes on to the general conversation of abortion. Otherwise, though,
And that's it. That like access is your job.
access
Full
and
stop.
public education,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you
Yeah.
have done a lot of work to ensure that people think that abortions are terrible. Now you need to do a lot
To
of work
undo
to
that.
undo that.
Wow.
Yeah.
But otherwise, though, it's absolutely a community conversation, right? And one that I think We Change will be having in a couple of years. But
I wonder if people understand what we mean when we say community like that. Let's say Tajna wants to have a child, right? She's excited. She ends up getting pregnant, and 2 months in, our friend decides, life is throwing several whammies at her, and she can't manage anymore. Christina, Babe, and I are in her community, right? And she's stating all of these difficulties. As much as we're gonna be there to support her, we also know that we have our primary lives that we'd be managing at the same time, and so we're not going to be there full time. A lot of this is going to be her and her partner, and so if she doesn't feel confident in carrying her pregnancy full term, what we should be able to do is sit with her and say, hey, regardless of the decision that you make, we're going to be here as much as you want us and will allow us to be here. If you choose to have an abortion, we'll follow you to I'm assuming a clinic, I would like for us to have abortions free in public clinics. That would
Or
be
do
nice.
it inside your living
No,
room.
do you want to know how I'd want it?
How
Just
would you
in
want
Let
case?
us know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Hello, community. I, I would, I'd first opt to have a medical abortion. I'd want to have it at home. I'd want to have it at home with, making sure that there is a fully functioning vehicle there and someone or a plethora of persons who are there to, transport me in case there's an emergency. I want to have all of my favorite foods. I want
Grey's Anatomy.
everything. Very fitting. Yeah, some Grey's Anatomy on. I want to be in conversation with my community, not necessarily about the abortion that's taking place. Just those are the things that comfort me, and I think that's why earlier I was saying, I'm very grateful that we exist in this time where like that's something that's completely safe and we can easily do that at home.
Yeah.
So those things are a big part of the conversation on care. It's what, not just the act of the abortion itself, but it's like you having those people, your community there for you, the resources that you need there, because a part of the care conversation is the government actually having those things accessible for you to just make a decision and do what you gotta do. So yeah,
as you
Care.
shared that, I realized that comfort is never considered in the conversation around abortion, and I think
It's
it's
true.
because it's supposed to be something that is
Yeah.
shameful.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
it's not a part of it? Because if you
and
think
if you
about
feel
it,
bad afterwards,
if you're a person who has cancer, the way how people will rally around you because it's such a life-threatening disease. I'm like,
Because it's something that's done to you.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's something that's done to you. It's not something that you're doing.
right, you don't
To
have a
yourself.
choice in it. Like
Yeah.
to be able to make that decision to have an abortion is something that you should be ashamed of for the rest of your life, and everybody should ostracize you. And I have no idea why we think that's okay. And it's not.
You know what else isn't either? Pleasure. Like we don't take pleasure as a serious part of negotiating sex or any of this. So yeah, it's everything in this conversation is supposed to be hard and traumatic, apparently.
Yeah.
Like
and then if it's not hard and traumatic for you, then it's not you are automatically careless. If
Yes.
you're not traumatized by it, then there was nothing. You never do it for no reason.
Yeah, wicked.
Yeah.
So true.
You have to feel bad.
Yeah.
Robin,
Mhm.
Robin says comfort is not considered in women's health, period. We are built to suffer.
Think
Truly.
about pap smears.
I was just thinking that. I had my most pleasurable pap smear last year. Big up to the nurse at Jamaica Cancer Society. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was like a slight pinch. She was talking to me through it. I almost burst into tears. I was like, this is the softest,
Never
gentlest
had
pap
it.
smear I've ever had in my life.
Never.
Listen. And I
You know,
that's-
so the sub them no need to be metal.
and
Like-
it don't need to be so big. She
And
used a
cold.
small one. She was like, "Oh, we don't have to use that one. We'll just use the tiny one." I said, "Excuse me, it is not
And
one size fits
one,
all."
You know what I love, especially about women and queer people in this world, especially those people who tap into their ancestral indigenous knowledge, is that I can remember at the Caribbean Women's, I cannot remember the name.
And sexuality and diversity
Conference, right? There was a woman there who handed out a package of plastic forceps and information on how to self-examine. And I loved that because I never thought that I could do that for myself. I didn't know that I had the ability or that I could be empowered to do something like that. And it's one of my favorite things that's happening around the conversation about reproductive health, which is that queer and indigenous and Black people are they're reframing this conversation in a way that says that you have autonomy over yourself, and that also your ancestors have knowledge that they have passed down through generations that is accessible and that is safe. And We can probably have a conversation about this next time because Shantae has all the info just about how herbs as a way of inducing an abortion can be an extremely safe thing once you have information and once you have somebody around you with that information.
Because our
grannies have been doing that.
No, okay. So all of the scary tactics that we've heard throughout the years, the rusty nail in Pepsi, there's other things that go into that. So like, don't take it at face
ones though.
Yeah, but not those ones,
Not those
obviously. But the actual herbs,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna say them here. I don't want to be, liable for anything.
Mm-hmm.
But practices that have been tried and true, though not scientifically certified, and we need to move away to why we think that is the only way to think that indigenous practices are valid, that have been throughout the years. And I love CJ's sharing what they like in their support. I'd want to have friends helping me through the process in case of an emergency, to be able to take time off from work.
Hold that.
I'd want to
I
be
love
able
that
to
you
access
said that.
therapy after if I need it. So
Shanique,
Like,
I love this.
you be thinking.
People need to be able to have a conversation saying, you know what? You don't even
Don't need to have a conversation.
Just things like menstrual leave, for example. Like all of those things have to be things where we're taking into consideration as like that employer should be taking into consideration. Because
sick leave. Suppose you have complications they last more than 10 days. I'm gonna tell us if you show up at work. Same way. I know some need a contract now get booked.
Hi Looney.
But like did you see the always go back to the other day where
the woman went into the pharmacy and the pharmacist tell her said no, she can't get the birth control or the Mr. Pastor because she don't know what she's gonna do with it if she's gonna induce an abortion.
No, but I have an experience like that. Like
over the
years ago, I was trying to get morning after pills, and the pharmacist.
The line of questioning.
Like I know that there are questions that come in that go into like giving someone morning after pills, but the line of questioning like asking me.
So right?
I was asked if my mother was aware that I was having sex. Me being someone with valid identification to prove that I was over the age of 18. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Reproductive justice.
But also, let us remember that a lot of the pharmacies in Jamaica also have that glass window. So if you're going to have to shout that. And I remember
they get mad enough to pill, no?
No, I did that because she did have one that she can't hear me say, Mama, I'm gonna want Pastor Nora, please.
I feel like going to a pharmacy and do that just because.
Serve. I beg you, Pastor Nora.
But also, why involved in everything around women's
shame.
like just shame.
Just anything
anything
around the female body is
just a shameful experience that you need
really
to...
shamed.
And from early too. From early in your life.
Early.
Made a comment earlier
about from 10
where they
years
said
old,
that girls are just treated like women as soon as you reach around 10 years old. It's just you have the responsibilities of there we go. Many women in Jamaica do not view girls as children. We're women as early as 10 years old.
The adultification of black girls.
Yeah. And when things happen to you, when things happen to you, it's not something happening to you. It's you inviting something to yourself because you are grown.
You make bad things until
you're not a good girl.
The age of forced sexual intercourse is 9, so we should probably be using our thinking brains. CJ saying I have a cousin who is CJ saying I have a cousin who is 12 years old. She doesn't understand that she has to drink sufficient water daily. I cannot imagine her deciding, yes, I can have a child. Okay, but we indoctrinate young girls to consider having children from a very early age. I remember, when they ask you to write like a composition when you're younger or whatever, and I was like, I'm 24 and I'm married and I have a child. Right. Friends, I am 8 years old. What am I doing thinking about a child? Now that I'm over 24 years old, what would I be doing with a child? No. Me couldn't manage. Me? But also, next comment is CJ. Working at a call center, I remember a co-worker had a miscarriage in the work bathroom and was told that she needed to return to work the next day. So I think we were saying that about
I'm coming there to
the sick leave, about that, and just I shouldn't have to disclose what's happening with my body. If me sick, full stop, come
Yeah.
a dash dash. I am entitled to my sick days, and this
Mhm.
is the thing with BPOs that people entitled to them sick leave, and if you start gather together and unionize because you're entitled to your sick leave and your
You are.
vacation. It's literally in our labor law. That'll be making people cool with you, but I understand.
Or also, we don't empower laborers to feel like anything more than machines.
No,
Yeah.
true.
And then if you take any kind of action, then you're demonized for it. Look how the NWC workers were demonized the other day. But another
NWC,
conversation.
there were several. Oh, y'all did lovely. I hope somebody's watching it. Y'all did lovely. You organized well. Yes.
All right. So I think we've passed our time or the time that we've given ourselves to talk.
We sure have.
So I guess maybe just to wrap up again,
Any questions?
reproductive. Right. If you have any questions, send them in the chat box and we'll respond to them.
No.
I guess we can take them out the next 10 minutes. But just to wrap up again, reproductive justice is a really important part of the conversation, or well, the only way to have this conversation, I believe. And again, when we talk about reproductive justice, we're talking about the conditions that exist for people to make the right decision for themselves about their reproductive lives. So we're talking about access to contraceptives. We're talking about homophobia, transphobia, sexism that exists. We're talking about environmental injustice. So unless and until those things are considered and talked about, then we'll never get to the place that we need to get to in order to have true reproductive freedom. And again, abortion is care. It's a very healthy, very safe, valid practice. I don't know why I said practice. Procedure that any person
has
can
been
have.
around for centuries.
It has been around for a very long time. We are now in a period where you can literally take medication to interrupt a pregnancy. It does not have to be a traumatic experience. And again, we need to I would also say that we should hold space for all the people who have felt like they needed to do very traumatic things to interrupt a pregnancy because we have not created a safe space for them to access abortions. So yeah.
What is the role of the diaspora in supporting or providing resources? Gemma! Hi, sweetie.
Hi, Gemma.
Do they have a role? Definitely, please, diaspora should really be lobbying.
I'd say that's one of your
legislators.
major. I think that would be one of the major ways that the diaspora can help right now, especially because the other things that you could do to help, it takes too many channels to go through. But
supporting organizations,
that are doing
Always
this kind of work, right? Lobby the governments because they depend on your remittances and your money, right? They depend on it. So lobby the government. Exactly. Lobby the governments in the countries that you are from here in the Caribbean who still have restrictive laws. Push them to actually make decisions that are in the best interest of people who are seeking abortions. And again, of course, support organizations like We Change.
And give them money.
I'm not gonna lie about it. Support organizations
and give them money.
If you also have a platform, ensure that you are very informed and support these organizations, asking them to come onto your platform and ensure that people are getting valid, up to date, proper information. And if you are persons who are going to school and you probably want to consider doing research on this, we are open to partnering. A lot of people have reached out to us about this particular topic. We're very open to that because when you reference us in the work that you do, especially at international universities, we come under scrutiny and then they therefore have to start, thinking about what they're gonna do to ensure that them look good abroad, not just a yard. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Also, keep supporting We Change. We have some really exciting things that are coming up very soon, especially if you're a writer. If you think that you are a brilliant, or at least at the very least, an okay writer, definitely keep posted to our pages, especially if you are queer, specifically if you are trans or non-binary, and you are somebody who could get pregnant. We would love to hear from you, or well, we want to hear from you. We also want to hear from people who have any sort of disability. Yeah, we're gonna be doing a very cool project. Not just now, but specifically right now, we're gonna be working on something very cool, and we'd really like to have you participating in this with us, because we want
need
to, yeah, we want to ensure that as much as we want, as Shante had said, we want people who are abroad to, do this sort of research. We also want to be the producers of our own narrative. We want to be the producers of our own information and our own knowledge, and we want to write our own stories. And I want to encourage you, again, keep posted, because something might be there for you. All right, my tech support is showing me something. A question. Governments are responsible for access and education, truth, but abortion legislation has been on the table for years. So does the parliamentary process work to protect the rights of everyone, or only the few rights of, you're not even done with few rights? Spoiler alert, in a post-colonial society, state powers exist to preserve the status quo and protect the interests of the ruling class. Robin?
I'm very surprised whenever we always say in a post-colonial society. Anything about us seem post-colonial?
We're neo-colonial. We're neo-colonial.
Anything about us
We're
seem
very
post-colonial?
neo-colonial.
I also like whenever I hear North American scholars talk about or realities and say in post-colonial Jamaica, we're not there yet, sweetie. Still very much living in a neo-colonial.
We don't want to talk about that.
But you're very right. The parliamentary process obviously has not been working, and
because we've exercised
it has
that,
failed
right?
us.
We've done what is considered to be political participation by making several submissions to Parliament.
And we do it more than once. Not we, but we've
across the years
done it more than once. So it's safe. It's very safe to say that it's failed us.
Which is
but maybe it was not made to work in our favor in the first place, and we should probably really know our expectations of the parliamentary process, because clearly we were not considered in it. Yeah, maybe. But also, if you're a person who has a small business physically and you'd like to host our brochures, please let us know.
We're gonna show you one of our cute pamphlets.
We're also gonna launch them digitally as well for you to share on your platforms.
No what's the Deva She just grabbed. So we worked on these really cute pamphlets. Big up Chris. Exactly, big up Christina who designed it. Very inclusive, because we want people to know that we understand that there are several categories of people who are having abortions. Yeah. We have the information.
So little sneak peek.
The you have to do the influencer thing and like.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
The information is very simple, very accessible, friendly, very just really accessible language that we think that anybody could have. And of course, as Shante said, we're working on making it digital and also a lot more accessible. So accessible in a way where people who are blind and who might need alternative text, and also for people who are hearing impaired or deaf. So we want to ensure, again, that this information reaches as many persons as possible. There's nothing more powerful than information right now, right? So if you have a small business,
or a big business,
or if you know somebody with a small or a big business, if you have a restaurant, if you have a hair salon, if you have one shop down the road, if you have one stall in a halfway tree, we are more than happy to give one of these or a couple of these to you for you to pass out to people, just so that them can know it. Again, we're not trying to convince nobody of anything. We just want people to have information so that they can make decisions for themselves. So again,
the front. So it looks like at the front.
Not the influencer, no.
Right.
What about, so Martha, we're working on our digital versions also being audible.
Yes. Yes, we are. It's gonna be
So
cool.
it's coming. We're releasing it very soon
Just give some time. We're a small organization trying to do really big things.
on it.
So-
It really are.
Yeah. So yeah, stay tuned to We Change. Keep on supporting us. We really appreciate all the people who continue to support and send them love to we. We love them back. So yeah, thank you for what Krista do.
Hearts, the Korean heart.
Oh, okay. Not the K-drama queen. Oh, there's another question.
That's my bed.
Yeah.
Oh.
We
Yes.
answered that.
Okay, yeah. So we are gonna have something audible for people to listen to. All right. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So our community aid, great opportunity to bring this up again. Well, let me let Dave do it because this is Dave's baby.
So you guys might have seen that we're advertising our community aid fund where we help the LBQT community here in Jamaica with money transfers because people need money and they need it for various reasons, and we're not trying to ask people to qualify
Yeah.
to
You don't need to explain to us why you need the money.
Right. You
just
need
need
money
to
to
need it.
survive. We have money for you. And so we have been asking persons to contribute, to donate to our community aid fund. We can say that we have distributed over $600,000 in community aid to the LBQT community here in Jamaica. That includes
And that's just this year alone.
and that's just this year. That's just since the start of this year. So to include trans persons, non-binary persons, gender non-conforming persons,
As long as you're
lesbian, queer, bisexual women, persons who have relocated because of unsafe living conditions, persons who just need money to buy food,
People
to
with
cover
kids.
rent, people with children, and even through our grocery support, which is separate, a grant that we received from CDC, we've helped 15 persons there with cash cards for grocery cards to shop at specific supermarkets so that they can continue to live and to survive. And it's been really touching helping persons in this way. And so we're asking you guys if you can contribute to our community aid fund, or if you can reach out to somebody who might be able to contribute, tell them. If you own small businesses, if you're able to, say you can give us a discount for persons who can come in and shop. Or if you have a farm and you want to contribute some sweet pepper, some onion, some tomatoes, so people can make up them pot, anything at all that you're able to offer, we will take it and we distribute it to those who need it.
And honestly, the smallest amount is
Everything.
okay, like $1,000. You can check our social media pages. We're everywhere at We Change JA. You'll be able to see our banking information as well as our PayPal. And again, 100% of that money goes into the pockets of a queer Jamaican. And for any queer person who's listening, it doesn't need to be a dire emergency for you to access this money. If you have some pills, some prescriptions that you need to fill, you can ask for support for that. If you have, I don't know, just some sort of need and you probably can't access it right now. You probably can't access some money to get that need right now. If you need a small little money, if you keep it for the next month while your new job comes in, whatever it is, this community aid is for you. Again, you don't need to be on your face. You don't need to be homeless in order to access it. It is for you. It is to help you. Just reach out to us via wechangeja@gmail.com and or slide into our DMs. Slide into our DMs on Twitter or on IG, anywhere, and Dave will answer you, and then we will, of course, respond.
Yes.
So thank you again to everybody who joined in. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you spending a bit of your Sunday with us and chatting with us. Thank you so much. I don't know if anybody else wants to say anything. No, we're good.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.
No, wait, not